Hi, I'm Andrea.
And I'm Krista, and we are graduate students at Cleveland State University.
I'm Shah, Associate Professor at Cleveland State, and we are going to be interviewing our graduate students in their experience of using the CAAI with our accented client. So tell us, what were your thoughts when you got assigned to a diagnostic of a foreign accented client? What kind of things were you worried or unsure about?
I think that we were both a little bit nervous going into it and somewhat intimidated just because we had never had experience with a client with a foreign accent before. I knew that I was happy to have the opportunity to do it, but I felt that I would need a lot of guidance going into it. We weren't exactly sure what we would be assessing, would we be assessing it correctly, and also what information we needed to know about the client's language in order to do the assessment.
Our classes have always focused on multiculturalism, but not where to go from there.
So given that you had limited familiarity with foreign accented client, where did you start? How did you get up to speed in this area of testing?
We knew a general outline of what needed to be done in the diagnostic, but we didn't know what areas that needed to be tested or what assessment to use for an accented client.
We spent some time looking at different tests in our clinic. One specifically that we looked at was the Comptons, which didn't seem to be as in-depth. And then when we were able to look at the CAAI and notice that as part of the test manual, there are several different sections that are broken up that tell you exactly what areas are going to be assessed, which was very helpful in determining which areas we needed to look at with our client.
So what about your fellow students? What's the general knowledge among your peers? You think they know more in this area? They might be able to help you?
We talked to some of our classmates, and they didn't really have much advice for us. They all knew that we worked with clients with accents, but they didn't really know where to start either.
We knew that it was an area in the field that we needed to be knowledgeable about, but it's not discussed a lot in our classes. Before we administered the test, I assumed that the majority of the test would have to do with articulation, and then in looking through the CAAI, realized that the articulation was really only a piece of the test, that many more areas were assessed.
So tell us about your experience using the CAAI.
Once we actually picked the CAAI, it was nice because all of it was already put together, so nothing extra needed to be brought to the diagnostic that we had to do.
I think that the manual was very organized. We found that very helpful to look through before we administered the test. There was a rationale for each of the subtests, so we understood why each test was being administered, not just how to do it, but why we were doing it as well.
So we were able to learn a lot through the manual.
And also it talked about the difference between accentedness and intelligibility. That wasn't really something that we had thought about before, and then once we read through the manual and looked at that, it was something that we were more aware of as we administered the test.
How did you use the CAAI? What kind of training was involved?
Well, initially we just read through the manual. It was pretty self-explanatory. All of the procedures were laid out very well. And then we actually just practiced the subtests on each other. So administration was pretty smooth.
Yeah, it was really easy for the client to follow the directions, and it only took us about an hour to do the assessment.
So after administering the test, how did you handle the rest of the details of scoring, what to do with the scores, and also did you feel comfortable doing that part? That can anyone do this?
Once we got our scores in our scoring form, it was easy because we could put them into the diagnostic profile, and we were able to see where his difficulties lied within his accentedness and intelligibility. And then from there, we were able to write our goals and objectives for the client.
Yeah, I think that based on the fact that this was our first diagnostic experience, the scoring took us a little bit longer, but for a more experienced clinician, anyone should really be able to use the response form to complete the diagnostic profile and then create goals from that.
So was it useful to have the CAAI? What would it have done if you, what would your experience have been if you didn't have it? Would you have done without it?
I think that the CAAI was very necessary for us because without it, we would have had to do a lot of additional research just on the area of accentedness and intelligibility. So the test was a good resource in that aspect. We learned how to do the test, the rationale behind the subtests, the methods that work, and then just additional information about foreign accentedness.
And the good thing about the test was it wasn't biased toward any specific accent. We could have used it with any client, so we can use it in the future as well.
So what did you like best about the CAAI? What was one of the best features in your opinion?
Well, I think that the manual is very detailed, it's very organized, and then administration, the procedures for the administration are very clear, so you know exactly what the client needs, or what you need to do and what the client needs to do. The client also has a response sheet in front of him, so that as you're going through the test, the client just is able to flip through this and keep up with each of the subtests.
Examples of the typical errors as well as the different intonation patterns were shown as you were scoring, so it was easy to follow through with what he was saying as well as what should have been said, even with articulation.
Then also I think with the administration stimuli book, it's all completely color-coded, so it's very easy to see what errors are being made, what the responses should be, how to count, which responses should count as being correct or incorrect. So that was very easy. It was very quick administration, not a lot of flipping back and forth in the scoring form.
And that's the same with the administration stimuli that we used. It had the directions and everything listed, but it wasn't overbearing. It wasn't everything all over a page. You were able to quickly read it and say, this is what you need to do in this section.
And then also in the administration book, there are different kind of helpful things for the clinician. Prosody is kind of a difficult thing to measure and to listen for as you're administering the test. And so within the administration stimuli, these intonation lines are included with each of the responses so that the clinician knows exactly what to listen for in terms of intonation, rise or fall of pitch, pausing, stress, those kinds of things. And there's a lot of different subtests within the CAAI that deal with those types of areas. So it's very helpful for the clinician to have the intonation lines that will help the clinician to determine what the correct response should be.
Then you can take this quantitative data and put it into the diagnostic profile to see if the client has a mild to strong difficulty with either intonation or articulation or whatever their specific difficulty was.
So overall, what were some of the areas of limitations or challenges that you would say you encountered in your diagnostic procedure?
I think that with anything, the first time that you do something, you're always going to be a little bit nervous. So I think given that this was our first diagnostic experience, we weren't as confident going into it.
I think afterwards we felt much better about the whole experience as a whole instead of, it wasn't the test, it was we were here, it was us. In doing the test in another, say in a week or so from now, we would be much more prepared even in ourselves. When we were doing the diagnostic with the client, it all went very smoothly, and doing it with another client I think would be beneficial for us because we know so much more about the test and about clients who might have an accent.
So having had this accented client and learning about the assessment of accented speech, how do you see this applies to your future work as a speech language pathologist? Do you see yourself doing this?
I just feel that we really owe it to our clients to know about this area, so we can't turn anybody away, and we can help them for either further education, their careers, if this is what area they need help with.
I think this has really helped jumpstart our education toward learning more about clients with accents. No matter where we work, we're going to run into somebody who either wants to modify their accent, or it's just something that is becoming more prevalent in our field that needs to be more focused on more.
And I think that just because there's not a lot of literature out there about this particular topic, that just having the information within the testing manual and all of the procedures, all the areas that need to be assessed, I think that was just really helpful in furthering our education in this particular area. And, you know, like I said initially, I thought it was going to be primarily articulation, and there was so much more to it than that. If people are intimidated and they're nervous about going into this because they may not have had a client with a foreign accent before, that they shouldn't feel that way, because this test is very easy to administer, and it really makes it's really user-friendly. And I also think that if I was talking to any of my colleagues that, you know, they may think that they're not going to encounter this in their practice. And I would say to them, given that we work in such a diverse population and demographics are always changing, this is absolutely information that you need to have, and that you should have exposure to it, you should be knowledgeable about it, and even if you're nervous going into it, this particular test, administration of this test, can kind of be the gateway to future work in this particular area.